How's it going, everyone, and welcome in for another edition of the unofficial WCC Hoops podcast. A lot to get into. The Pac-12, the 8 teams of the Pac-12 have signed their grant of rights agreements. We're going to talk a bit about what that's going to mean. Obviously, it impacts the WCC as 3 teams currently are going to be part of that new Pac-12. Talk about some of the NCAA rule changes that have been announced and how that's going to impact, obviously, the sport as well. And we'll talk, speaking of news, speaking of transitions, we'll talk to Seattle head coach Chris Victor about their program's transition and move to the WCC, what that has all looked like in the last year, and what we could expect to see from the Redhawks in their first year in the WCC. But we're going to start off with the biggest news of the last few weeks, and that is the settlement for the House versus NCAA case, which this is the case that essentially ends the idea of amateurism in college sports. And a lot to get into with this one, but the big takeaways. Beginning July 1st, universities will be allowed to pay student athletes directly. They'll be allowed to share up to $20.5 million per academic year, increasing at least 4% every year for the next 10 years. Now, this is the Power Four that has negotiated this, and this is what they have all agreed to. The G6 and the other mid-major programs, conferences have the choice to opt in. Initially, that deadline was June 15th, but that has been extended out to June 30th. So that is one of the biggest things. 2, this is separate from NIL. So this is not going to impact what is already happening on the NIL front. However, something that will impact that is the establishment of the College Sports Commission. This commission will validate via a clearinghouse that will be named NIL Go all deals that are worth more than $600. So this is to make sure that there's actually a service being provided. Of course, it's going to be very hard to really kind of dictate what market value is for these individual items, because really isn't the market value kind of what you're paying each of these players. But that is what we're going to be seeing, is the establishment of that commission. Roster sizes have also been impacted by this change, and it's not just men's basketball, it is across all of college sports. Roster sizes will now be capped in every sport, but the restriction for scholarships has been lifted. So as an example, men's basketball will have a set roster size of 15, but they will no longer be restricted to the 13 scholarships, which has been the case. They could have 15 scholarships for men's basketball. Now, you could say that the lifting of the scholarships is a good thing, that they can go out and scholarship more players or whatnot. But what this does take away is the walk-ons. This takes away a lot of the opportunities for student athletes across the board. And this is revenue sports and non-revenue sports. The move is expected to the cutting of nearly 5,000 student athletes from their teams across the NCAA's 43 sponsored sports. I mean, even you think about within the WCC, there have been a number of notable walk-ons: Tommy Kuzi, Luke Barrett, Josiah Lake II. Like, there are quality walk-on players that play all the sports. And again, it's also football, it's basketball, it's baseball. It's going to really restrict a lot of what we're going to see at the Division I level. And this is the one where it's like, you talk about like the number of good things, like NIL, like student athletes being paid to works in theory, but this is going to have a obviously significant impact on the low majors, the mid-major conferences, because I mentioned the $20.5 million that you're allowed to spend up to. Most of these departments don't have that much revenue to actually share with student athletes. So this is where we're going to run into the haves and the have-nots. We are going to run into greater challenges in how you're going to be able to be on the recruiting trail. What changes are going to occur when it comes to Title IX? There's already a case out there that's bringing up this very issue. I bet there's going to be a challenge to the roster limits. And for the WCC, it's now the one thing that might be beneficial for a conference like the WCC or maybe the Big East. That 20.5 million is across all of your sports. And if you are a Big East school, a WCC school, and you agree to that cap, you don't have football to deal with. You can now actually allocate more of your funds for men's basketball, for women's basketball, than maybe a school that does have football and is going to prioritize football. I mean, you could imagine that. I think I've even seen some of the numbers where it's going to be probably 85% goes to 85% goes to football, probably like 10 to 15% goes to men's basketball, 5% to women's basketball, and then whatever is left over would go to the other non-revenue sports. And for the smaller conferences, the ones who do not play football, this is, and it can be an advantage if you are making enough revenue to be able to kind of take advantage of it. You can imagine the likes of even UConn, who does have a football team. You could imagine that they're probably actually going to spend a larger percent of that 20.5 on basketball because that is their money sport. In the places like Creighton, Villanova, St. John's, Gonzaga, this is all going to benefit those schools. St. Mary's, the USFs and the Santa Claras. Like, when you look at the schools that prioritize basketball, it could end up being an advantage because whatever revenue you do bring in isn't going to have to share it with a football program. Now, a lot of these programs don't make nearly as much as those football schools do, so there is that part of it. But there is a chance that it could end up being an advantage for the non-football schools. And the settlement also does include a $2.8 billion 10-year settlement that will pay past players for missed NIL opportunities, and that will allow colleges to then pay players directly. That this agreement is going to back pay athletes who competed between 2016 and 2024. So there's still a number of things that are going to come out of this, but this is it shakes the entire foundation of college sports, of the NCAA. Honestly, we might be one step closer to the dissolution of the NCAA altogether. This just feels like one more step for the Power Four to declare its independence away from the NCAA, as now even the NIL validation process will no longer have to be done by the NCAA, which really now limits that organization to academic violations, and maybe that's about it. So next on the list I have is the new Pac-12 members. All 8 of them. You have Oregon State, Washington State, Fresno State, Colorado State, Utah State, San Diego State, Boise State, and Gonzaga. All have signed their grant of right and membership agreements. This is coming from Yahoo Sports. This was announced 2 Fridays ago, and it's a signal that the league is finalizing that new media rights package, and we should expect an announcement in the coming days. The media rights package is expected to feature as many as 4 media partners. This is according to Yahoo Sports. And the package paves the way for the league to formally offer invitations to expansion targets. That, because we still know they need at least one more football school. A lot of rumors about who that might be. Could it still end up being UNLV? Is it Texas State? Are we going to see Tulane and Memphis still be involved in this? And that doesn't mean that they wouldn't also expand to other non-football programs, but football is still the priority here. They have to get that last one done before the 30th, as July 1st is the deadline the Pac-12 has to meet to qualify to be back in be a real conference in the FBS come next season. And yes, like, a lot of the focus is going to be, it's UNLV, Texas State, Memphis, Tulane, the schools who prioritize football, but also do have decent basketball programs. Now, Texas State, not so much on the basketball front, but UNLV, yes. Memphis, yes. Tulane, yes. UNLV has the challenge of their financial situation is not great. There is a lot of uneasiness when it comes to that program and where they are on a financial front. They've struggled on the NIL end. And now, while they've kind of been using the whole Mountain West exodus as a way to maybe cover some of their losses over the recent years, it seems like a UNLV addition right now may not make a whole lot of sense, because that could put UNLV even further into short-term debt, even though the potential long-term financial benefits are there. Are they going to be able to make up for it and be competitive early on? And that's definitely a big concern for UNLV in this whole situation. Obviously, there was also rumors, and there still is going to be chatter about whether St. Mary's gets an invite to this at all. And there was movement a few months ago that, St. Mary's name was being brought up a little bit more often. That has slowed. We haven't heard their name come up as of late. But that doesn't mean it's going to be the first one mentioned either. Football is going to be mentioned first. Whichever school gets the next invite is going to be football first. That's just a bottom line to this. And we're probably only days away from hearing who that next team is. And right now it is going to be a subtraction of 3 schools from the WCC. We knew Washington State and Oregon State were always going to do this. Gonzaga now going along with them as obviously a basketball first school, the basketball program in that conference. They are going to enter that league as the number 1 program on the men's basketball front. And looking at the WCC, let's assume that it's just those 3 that do vacate. So you do still have St. Mary's at the top, USF Santa Clara. You have the likes of Seattle coming in. You don't have Grand Canyon anymore, which would have been a big boost to this conference. But it is going to mean that there's opportunity for the Pacifics, the LMUs, the San Diegos, everyone else who really hasn't had much of a shot to get into that top half, of the WCC. Albeit, when you talk about resumes, you talk about getting to the tournament is one thing, but then what your seeding is in the tournament, this conference is going to take a hit, and it's going to be a sizable hit, because minimum you're looking at 4 quad 1 games that are walking out the door with those 3 teams. This year it was 5 quad 1 games with those 3 walking out. The eyes that Gonzaga draws will not be there. The eyes that Washington State and Oregon State have drawn over the last year will not be there. What happens to Las Vegas? What happens to the WCC tournament, which has been at the Orleans since 2009, but without Gonzaga, without some of the bigger schools, I mean, even BYU being a part of that for years and years. With only 1 more year on the contract with the Orleans, could they be moving from that location? So there's a lot of trickle down from the announcement of the grant of rights, from the membership agreements, and whoever may still be joining them. I get the feeling that realignment is going to still impact the WCC for the next few years, but we're just going to have to wait and see how the WCC is impacted with some of these changes. All right. With that, we're going to talk a little bit about this coming season and what we're going to be seeing with the WCC, and specifically the newest team in the league, Seattle. The Redhawks are coming in. They're coming off of a 14-18 season, but this is a team that won 20 games 3 straight years before last season. They haven't quite been able to break through to the NCAA tournament out of the WAC, but this is a program that seems to be pointed generally in the right direction. And we're going to talk to head coach Chris Victor and and take a look at where Seattle is right now, the changes that have happened over the last 12 months, and what we could look forward to in the coming season. All right, so we're bringing in Seattle head coach Chris Victor. He's entering his 5th season as head coach and 9th overall with the Redhawks. Coach, how's it going, and how is the first offseason kind of going into WCC play?
Awesome, man. Thanks for having me, Zach. Appreciate it. Been a wild off season, as you guys are aware of the recruiting and portal, mixing the NIL and all those transformations. But it's been good. I'm excited about the guys we have coming back. Looking forward to working with our newcomers here soon, and just excited about our roster and joining the new conference.
And joining that new conference, obviously about a year ago, we got the announcement that Seattle would be joining the WCC. And I'm sure that in the last 12 months that there have been a lot of changes internally. As you prepared for that transition, kind of talk through a little bit what was maybe the initial excitement of the announcement, and then what some of those preparations have been to get ready for this first season in the WCC.
Yeah, this is more than just a basketball conference or an athletic conference switch. This is a big deal for a whole university. Seattle was part of the WCC back in the 70s. Ever since we went back to Division I 15, 16 years ago, longer now, this has kind of been the goal of the university to get back to WCC. You see it more as a natural fit for our whole school. The announcement that we were joining WCC, obviously it's a big basketball move. We're joining one heck of a basketball conference, but really the excitement was around the whole university, including our alum. So this has been a fun time. July 1st, we officially become members coming up here soon. And, the basketball is different. It's a heck of a basketball conference. And, part of the changes you get around campus, the signage is going to be different. We've got to get a new floor, get the WCC logo on there. We got to get new uniforms, but just getting our roster ready to join that conference, making sure we add a little bit of size. I know it's a big conference, beat you up a little bit, add some size, and get ready to compete.
Yeah, when you think about just, again, like trying to build that roster because you're looking at a different profile, WCC versus the WAC, what was kind of the strategy when you were starting to kind of add on to the roster? Obviously, you have a good core coming back, 5 of your 6 leading scorers returning. But as you started to look at the next group of guys, how have you kind of like really tried to construct that roster?
Yeah, I think we're going to build it similar to how we built in the past, meaning the type of player we want to bring in. But I think what changed, like I mentioned before, is just make sure you're having some size and some depth. That conference night in, night out, when you get on those 2-game weeks, whether you're at home or on the road, you got to have some big boys down there that can battle. I mean, I don't think it's just size as in the post, but size along the perimeter as well. We played a handful of WCC teams over the last years, and that's something that's always stuck out. It's just the guards are bigger, interior players have good size and are physical. So that's something we've been talking about as a program, just making sure that we're as prepared as we can be for that.
I mean, you mentioned some of the games that you've had with WCC opponents, but you've also coached with a couple of the other coaches as well, Shante Leggins and David Riley. When the announcement was made, or even leading up to that, have you had conversations with either of them about what it was going to be like going into this league? Had there been any sort of the banter between the 3 of you about just the competition you guys are going to have now that you'll all be in the same league together?
Yeah, I mean, I'm close with both Shante and Dave, and the conversation started before we were announced that we entered the conference, maybe before we knew we were going in there. Just having basketball conversations during them in the conference. This was Dave's first year, so I know he learned a lot going through for the first time, and Shantae's been there for a few years. So, picking their brains and taking the advice from those guys that have been through it and that have been in the conference before. So when the schedule comes out and we get dates and we get locations, I'm sure there'll be a little bit of some text messages going around about those games with those guys. But not quite yet.
What should maybe be like the style play that WCC fans should expect from your teams? Now, obviously, like this past year was a little bit of a down year, that 14 and 18, but you were coming off 3 straight 20-win years. What should we expect to kind of see going into this first year in the league?
Yeah, I mean, looking at this roster and how we've played in the past, this is we've been a defensive oriented team, a team that's going to be physical on both ends of the floor, but the physicality on the defensive end, an aggressive defensive style. We want to play with pace and play free offensively. I think it's a fun brand of basketball to watch and be a part of. And coming from the WAC conference, when the teams in our conference from top to bottom had such unique styles, depending on who you were playing on a given night. But I think that what stood out for us and what's been consistent has been the defensive side of the basketball, and then offensively, we're gonna play fast, shoot a lot of threes, and be aggressive.
So again, like thinking about like what should expect. Again, you kind of mentioned all the different styles in the WAC, and there were some really good teams in the WAC this past year. Obviously, Grand Canyon was still up there. Utah Valley was really good. What can you maybe take like from some of the lessons that you've learned in there to kind of transfer over to the WCC? Because even those WAC teams, not just your team, but others have had success against the WCC as well. Grand Canyon beating St. Mary's in the WCC tournament a couple of years ago. So we've seen like this, especially the top half of the WAC, be really competitive with a bunch of the teams out west.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I think the WAC's been an underrated basketball conference over the last few years. Maybe not as many household names as the WCC, but it's been a very good basketball conference. And I think some of the lessons you learn are the difficulty and how to win on the road. Going into these opponents' places, traveling the cities, is winning a game on the road is difficult. And then being able to hold home court advantage and win your games at home, I think those lessons transfer to any conference. We've got some tough travel in the WAC. We were traveling from Seattle all the way down to Texas. The travel in WCC is going to be a little nicer to us, staying in one time zone, staying on the West Coast. But we played in some big time environments. Playing at Grand Canyon is unique. And I know WCC has some of those environments as well. So taking what we've learned from there, playing against those conference teams on the road, how to get that done, is something that we'll be able to take with us.
Yeah, and then some of the pieces that you're bringing in are also kind of like those familiar names, like Austin Maurer coming over from Grand Canyon. You bring in Brock Felder, who's at Southern Utah. So some guys you were familiar with in league play, but then some others who, I mean, one name whose WCC people are familiar with in June Suk-yo coming over to your squad. As you kind of talk about a little bit about just the newcomers that you've kind of brought in. Obviously, you haven't been able to kind of work with them quite yet on the court, but just based on the conversations you've had with them and the film you've been able to see and just the scouting you've been able to do, what excites you about this group coming in for your team?
Yeah, it's a very skilled group of basketball players. We start with the two big fellas that you mentioned, Austin and Brock. We've known Austin's from Portland or from Oregon area of Medford, and we've had known him for a while, watching him grow up in his high school team, and didn't get a lot of playing time this year at Grand Canyon, but we're very familiar with him before he went there. So I'm excited to have him, his size, his athleticism, his versatility, and his skill. Brock, we competed against 2 years at Southern Utah in the conference, and just always been a fan of his. Extremely physical, athletic, tough. I think they complement each other very well, and can both add something really, really unique. And then also, talk about June, who's highly decorated player from Korea. Didn't get the time that he was hoping for at Gonzaga, and is looking to do something more on the court. And we're excited to have him. He's really skilled and can really score the ball and shoot. And then you talk about a couple guards that we brought in, and JoJo Morfrey, who again from the Bay Area, familiar with him throughout high school, known him for a long time in his years at Chico, and guy can really score the ball, dynamic guard, big time shooter, big time scorer. They got some toughness to him. And then you got Miles Amos from City College of San Francisco. We've had a lot of success recruiting those guys. He he's team captain of state championship team, player of the year in California. So guys that we've been familiar with from programs, both at the high school level and collegiate level, that we're familiar with. And I think all of them bring something unique to the table. And we start workouts here soon in the summer, and I'm excited to get them all together.
I mean, again, like I'm just even kind of scanning through, it's like, yeah, there's a lot of really interesting pieces, a lot of unique skill. I mean, Felder just even thinking about just like the size and what stood out, like the 2.3 1-3 blocks per game obviously is something that jumps out at you. And the WCC isn't entirely a league with a bunch of like really good shot blockers. So that is something that it feels like is going to be unique to that group. But it's not just the newcomers that are coming in, because yes, there's a lot of talent there. But again, I mentioned, like, you bring back 5 of your top 6 scorers from last year's team, and you have a lot of experience there with Paris Dawson, Kobe Williamson, Braden Maldonado, Malik Arrington. Just kind of talk about, like, again, like what this group is going to kind of be able to teach the newcomers about how this program runs, and then what's maybe the expectations for this team going forward.
Yeah, Kobe and Paris actually exhausted their eligibility last year, so they won't be coming back. I wish we can get Kobe and Paris back. I would love to have them for another year. But we have a good trio of guards coming back. Braden Maldonado, you mentioned, had a great first year with us. John Christophilus, who's been on their program for 2 years. Malik Arrington, local guy who's going to come be a senior. 3 guys that have experience in this program. I've had some big moments in this program, and part of growing and staying in the same place is that you expect some improvement from year to year. So looking forward to having those guys back. We had our young big guy who ran Dan, who's going to be back. Had some good minutes this freshman year when Kobe was hurt with his broken foot, and started a handful of games for us. And he's had a great spring. Looking for him to make a big jump this sophomore year and come back. So and then Will Heimbrod, who was a freshman, Bay Area kid who played a lot his freshman year, had a big role for us. So that should pay dividends for him moving into his sophomore year. So yeah, a lot of guys that played a lot of minutes and some big moments for us have had good springs, and looking forward to them to have good summers. I think it's going to be a fun mix when we get that group together with the new guys coming in.
All right. So, I mean, just thinking about through, like, again, like you talked about, like the pieces they're bringing in. The one thing that's, I think, a little unique, I mean, more teams are starting to do this, is thinking about where you're playing from game to game. It's obviously they're at the Redhawks Center for a good number of your games, but for the bigger ones, you've moved it over to Climate Pledge. How do you know typically how many games you'd be able to move it over to Climate Pledge? Or obviously think about, like, Gonzaga probably that game moves over there, but typically when you think about with WAC play in the non-conference, what's been kind of like the back and forth there?
Really depends on the open dates and scheduling. Hockey starts around the same time, and the Seattle have the Kraken that play in the same building. So it's really figuring out what dates work and working with the conference to find the best fit for certain matchups. So we've been fortunate to play there and love playing at Climate Pledge, and I'm hoping we can get a good amount of games there this year. We have both non-conference and conference play.
I just want to touch on a little bit on the rule changes as well. Sorry about that. Thinking about, like, some of the rule changes. So we got the announcement that there are going to be some adjustments. You're going to get the coaches challenge. You're going to be able to look at out of bounds. You're going to look at 3-point line. You're going to look at some different things there. But then also we're going to get the continuation rule, which is obviously a huge thing. Of the rule changes, what's been the biggest thing to you, and how do you think that's going to either enhance what you guys do, or how you're going to be able to have to adjust? Because they've also kind of emphasized a little bit of the physical play as well on the other end.
Yeah, I think one of the positives about the changing and giving the coaches a challenge, I'm hoping it'll limit the official reviews at the end of the game. I think sometimes every call out of bounds, everything was reviewed. Those reviews took a long time and really hurt the flow at the end of games. I'm hoping with the coaches' challenges, it'll be a little more streamlined, and we can kind of keep the flow of the game going a little bit better towards those last 2 minutes of the game. We'll see how it works. I mean, I'm hoping, that's an interesting ad, talking about the strategy behind when you use it, how you use it, if you save it. I know if you use it once and you win your challenge and you got to use it again. Have to meet with the staff before the game and kind of mess around with that a little bit in practice and see what that looks like. But and the continuation one's the same. I'll have to talk to some officials and see how that's going to be interpreted. Seeing it on paper is one thing, and reading what the intention is, but really talking to the officials and see how they're going to call it, and then figure out how we're going to teach it in practice. Because that's a big change, man. That's a big difference. Even seeing how the defense reacts when there's a whistle on the foul call, if the guys can be able to continue to take another step and score. You talk about the offense changing their mentality, because a lot of times, when you grow up playing and you have a bunch of experience playing one way, that rule change is hard to get accustomed to when you're a player in the moment. I'm talking to some officials this summer, and trying to get a feel so we can work on it before the year starts.
Yeah, definitely going to be a lot of changes there, and just going to be exciting to see how it all kind of shakes out. Because yeah, you're right. It's like a lot of those, just the amount of time we're seeing at the end of games with all the reviews and everything else. I mean, really on every level, it just seems like that is just like it's dragging out a little too much.
And I think it's a good thing to get the call right.
Sure,
but at the same time, there's got to be a good balance with the flow of the game. I mean, there shouldn't be a long time out every dead ball. So hopefully this rule helps that.
Yeah, and overall, I mean, like having Seattle joining this league, I was honestly excited for, because it gives me an excuse to visit Seattle, because that's the city that when you look at like the rest of the WCC schools, you have San Diego, LA, San Francisco, like 3 in the Bay Area, Portland. Like there's some really fun cities on this, and Seattle just adds one more to that. And so happy you guys are in, because now it gives me one more excuse. So I'm definitely going to try to make my way up to Seattle at some point.
Yeah, you got that. You got the hat ready.
Exactly.
You got the hat ready to go. Yeah,
I almost lost this thing actually on a bike ride in Seattle, but was able to track this thing down. But yeah, definitely ready for Seattle. Spent some time up there, so know the city pretty well. But yeah, it'll be a lot of fun. Good luck, Coach, this season. Obviously long way to go before we actually start playing games. You have any idea of like some of the non-conference games that you might have that you can actually mention at this point that are going to be big ones?
Yeah, we should be releasing that soon. I know we're trying to stay more in this time zone on the West Coast. So some fun regional matchups. This year we'll be hosting UW. We played them every year. Got our first win last year in a long time. We'll be hosting them at Climate Pledge Arena this year. So that'll be a fun non-conference that I'm looking forward to. And then we have some good matchups. We'll be playing Stanford on the road and some other regional teams at home. So it'll be a fun non-conference with some good matchups and some challenging games.
Awesome. Yeah, looking forward to that one against Washington at Climate Pledge. That'll be a lot of fun. Well, thanks a lot, Coach, for hopping on, chatting some Seattle basketball, and we'll definitely catch up at some point during the season, and hopefully I can make that trip up to Seattle to catch you guys in person.
Yeah, make it happen, man. Thanks for having me on, Zach. Appreciate it.